I was standing at the edge of the banquet hall when I saw her do it. My mother. Her hand hovering over my champagne glass. A small vial tilted between her fingers. 3 drops, maybe 4, disappearing into the golden liquid before she set the glass back down and smoothed her dress like nothing had happened. I didn't gasp. I didn't move. I just stood there, half hidden behind a marble column, watching her return to the table where my entire family sat laughing, celebrating. Celebrating me, supposedly. My graduation. My achievement. The thing I'd worked 4 years to earn. But the champagne glass sat there, waiting. Poisoned or drugged or spiked with something meant for me. And I realized, with a cold clarity that made my skin prickle, that I wasn't even surprised. My name is Lucy Peterson. I'm 22 years old. I graduated summa cum laude 3 hours ago with a degree in biochemistry, and my mother just tried to drug me at my own dinner party. That's the kind of daughter I am. The kind whose mother would rather see her incapacitated than celebrated. I should probably explain how we got here. I'd spent most of my life trying to understand what I did wrong. What made me unlovable in her eyes. I was 7 when I first noticed it. The way she'd light up when my older brother walked into a room, her whole face changing like someone had turned on a switch. Then I'd enter, and the light would dim. Not go out completely. Just reduce. Like I was worth less voltage. My father noticed, I think. But he never said anything. He's a quiet man, the kind who buries tension under spreadsheets and late nights at the office. He learned early that disagreeing with my mother meant weeks of cold silence, and he chose peace over protection. My brother, Daniel, is golden. Literally, blonde, athletic, charming in that effortless way that makes people want to be near him. He's 25 now, working at a finance firm our uncle got him into, and has never had to prove he deserved anything. He just exists, and things come to him. Love. Approval. Trust. I'd had to earn every scrap. The dinner was her idea. She insisted on it. Said it would be wrong not to celebrate such an accomplishment, her voice syrupy with false pride when she called the relatives. I knew better than to believe her, but some small, stupid part of me hoped. Hoped that maybe, finally, this would be the thing that made her see me. I wore the dress she bought me. Navy blue, conservative, not quite my style, but I didn't argue. I smiled when she introduced me to the guests, her friends, mostly, people I barely knew. She kept her hand on my shoulder like we were close, like she was proud, and I played along because that's what I'd always done. Kept my head down. Worked harder. Tried to be worth loving. The room was full of people now, maybe 40 of them, all dressed up and drinking wine that cost more than my textbooks. There was a banner that said "Congratulations Lucy" in gold letters, and a cake shaped like a graduation cap. It looked perfect. It looked like love. But I saw what I saw. I moved slowly back toward the table, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor. My mother was laughing at something Daniel said, her hand resting on his arm. My father was checking his phone. No one noticed me approach. The champagne glass sat exactly where she left it. I thought about what could be in it. Sedatives, maybe. Something to make me tired, embarrassing. Something to ruin the night and make me look unstable in front of all these people. Or maybe it was something worse. Maybe she wanted me gone entirely. I didn't know which possibility frightened me more. What I did know was this. I'd spent 22 years trying to earn her love, and I'd failed. I'd been the perfect daughter. Good grades, no scandals, no trouble. I stayed home on weekends to help her with dinner parties. I listened to her criticize my hair, my weight, my voice, my ambitions, and I swallowed every word like medicine. And she still hated me. I could see it now, standing there looking at that glass. It wasn't something I did. It was something I ***. Some fundamental flaw she saw in me from the beginning. Something that made her decide I wasn't worth protecting. But here's the thing about being unloved your whole life. It teaches you to observe. To notice. To see the small cruelties people think they're hiding. And I'd been watching her for years. I reached the table. My mother looked up, and for just a second, less than a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or calculation. Then it was gone, replaced by that smooth, pleasant expression she wore like a mask. She said something about me looking pale, asked if I was feeling well. Her voice was honey, concerned, maternal. I picked up the champagne glass. Everyone was watching now. Daniel raised his own glass, grinning. My father put his phone away. The guests quieted down, expecting a toast. My mother's eyes were locked on mine. And I smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a grateful, daughterly smile. A knowing one. The kind of smile that says, I saw you. I know what you did. Her face didn't change, but I saw her throat move as she swallowed. I set the glass down without drinking. Instead, I reached for the water pitcher, poured myself a glass, and took a long, slow sip. Then I excused myself to the bathroom, my voice steady and polite. No one stopped me. In the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink, my hands gripping the porcelain edge. My reflection stared back at me. Dark hair, dark eyes, the same face I'd had my whole life. Unremarkable. Forgettable. Not golden like Daniel. I thought about the glass sitting on the table. I thought about my mother's face when I didn't drink. I thought about all the years of small cruelties, the comments that cut, the love withheld, the way she'd made me feel like I was fundamentally wrong just for existing. And I thought about what happened next. Because I could walk out of there. I could go back to the table, get through the dinner, smile and thank everyone and pretend this was normal. I could go home that night and never speak of it. I could keep being the daughter who tried. Or I could do something else. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. Then I walked back out into the hallway, moving quietly, keeping to the edges of the room. I could see the table from here. See my mother lean forward, glancing around like she was checking something. Then she reached for my glass. She lifted it, casual, like she was just tidying up. And she poured the champagne into a nearby plant, the liquid disappearing into the soil. I took 3 photos. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I felt something settling inside me, something that had been trembling and uncertain my whole life finally going still. Evidence. Proof. Witness. I returned to the table before she noticed I was back. The dinner continued like nothing had happened. My mother smiled and chatted with her friends. Daniel told stories about his job, animated and loud, drawing laughter from around the table. My father nodded along, occasionally glancing at his watch. And I sat there, cutting my chicken into smaller and smaller pieces, chewing slowly, watching. I'd become good at watching. It was a skill I'd developed over years of trying to predict her moods, her reactions, the invisible lines I wasn't supposed to cross. I watched the way she touched Daniel's shoulder when she passed behind his chair. I watched the way she ignored me when I spoke, letting my words fade into the background noise like they didn't matter. I watched her avoid looking at the empty space where my champagne glass had been. A server came by and asked if I wanted another drink. My mother's head turned slightly, just enough that I knew she was listening. I asked for water. The server nodded and disappeared, and I felt my mother's attention shift away, uninterested. She'd expected me to drink it. Whatever was in that glass, she'd been so certain I would consume it without question that she hadn't prepared for this. For me seeing. For me knowing. The thought sat in my chest like a stone. Across the table, my Aunt Caroline was asking about my plans after graduation. What would I do now? Where would I work? Did I have any job offers? I'd had 3. All good ones. Research positions at reputable labs, the kind of opportunities my professors said were rare for someone fresh out of undergrad. I'd earned them through late nights and sacrifice, through choosing lab work over parties, through proving myself again and again. I told her about the offers. I kept my voice modest, factual. But I watched my mother's face while I spoke, and I saw it, the tightening around her mouth, the way her fingers pressed harder against her wine glass. She didn't want me to succeed. It wasn't just indifference. It was active resentment. My achievements weren't something to celebrate. They were something that bothered her. Made her uncomfortable. Maybe even angry. I'd known this, somewhere deep down, for years. But seeing it now, clear and undeniable, made something inside me crack. Daniel interrupted. making a joke about lab coats and safety goggles. Everyone laughed. The attention shifted back to him, and I faded into the background again. My accomplishments, my future, my 3 job offers, all of it dissolved like they'd never been mentioned. I excused myself again, this time saying I needed air. Outside, the evening was cool and quiet. The banquet hall was in a hotel downtown, and I stood on the sidewalk watching cars pass, trying to steady myself. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. Those 3 photos, sitting there, waiting. What was I going to do with them? I could confront her. Walk back inside, show everyone what she'd done, demand an explanation. But I knew how that would go. She'd deny it. Say I was mistaken, overwrought, stressed from graduation. She'd make me look hysterical. And everyone would believe her because that's what they always did. Mothers don't poison their daughters at graduation dinners. That's not something that happens in families like ours, families with money and reputation and carefully maintained appearances. Except it did happen. I had proof. But proof didn't always matter. Not when the person you were accusing knew exactly how to make you look unreliable. I thought about all the time she'd done this, not drugging, but undermining. The small comments about my weight when I was 14, delivered sweetly in front of relatives. The way she forgot my birthday 2 years in a row but threw Daniel elaborate parties. The time she told my high school guidance counselor I was too fragile for advanced classes, forcing me to fight for the placement I deserved. Death by 1,000 cuts. That's what they called it. And I'd bled quietly for years. A text came through from my roommate, Maya. She was asking how the dinner was going, if my family was being decent for once. Maya knew. Not everything, but enough. She'd seen me after phone calls with my mother, watched me try to shake off the heaviness that always followed our conversations. I typed back that it was fine. Then I deleted it and wrote complicated instead. Her response came immediately. Want me to fake an emergency? I smiled despite myself. Maya had offered to come with me tonight, to be a buffer, but I'd said no. I thought I could handle it. Thought maybe this time would be different. I told her I'd be home soon and put my phone away. When I went back inside, dessert was being served. The graduation cupcake sat in the center of the table, and my mother was slicing it with careful precision, making sure each piece was exactly the same size. She handed the first slice to Daniel. I sat down and waited. She served everyone else before she got to me. When she finally set a plate in front of me, the slice was smaller than the others. Just slightly. Just enough that I'd notice, but not enough that anyone else would. I picked up my fork and took a bite. The cake was vanilla with raspberry filling. Too sweet. My mother asked if I liked it. Her voice was pleasant, expectant. I told her it was perfect. She smiled, satisfied, and turned back to her conversation. I set down my fork and didn't eat another bite. The dinner wound down slowly. People started making excuses to leave, early mornings, long drives, babysitters waiting. They hugged me and said congratulations, told me how proud I must make my parents. I thanked them and smiled and said all the right things. My mother stood by the door, playing the gracious hostess, accepting compliments on what a lovely evening it had been. My father paid the bill. Daniel was on his phone, texting someone, barely aware the party was ending. And I stood there with my small slice of cake and my evidence and my clarity, wondering what came next. Because something had shifted. Not just in me, but in the whole structure of our relationship. She'd crossed a line tonight, and we both knew it. The question was what I was going to do about it. I could pretend it didn't happen. Go home, accept one of my job offers, move on with my life and let this be one more thing I didn't talk about. That would be easiest. Safest. Or I could stop pretending. The last guest left. The banquet hall staff started clearing tables, stacking chairs, taking down the banner with my name on it. My mother collected her purse and wrap, reminding Daniel about some brunch on Sunday. My father held the door. We walked to the parking lot together, a family of 4 who barely spoke to each other. My mother's car was parked near the entrance. She unlocked it and started to get in, then paused and looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time all night. She asked if I was all right. Said I'd been quiet during dinner. I met her eyes. In the parking lot lights, her face looked tired. Older. But not kind. Never kind. I told her I was fine. Just thinking about the future. She nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said she hoped I'd choose the right path. That some of those job offers were too ambitious for someone like me. That it was important to know my limitations. Someone like me. She got in her car and drove away. Daniel and my father followed in their own cars, and I stood there alone in the empty parking lot, my hands shaking, my chest tight. Someone like me. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos again. My mother's hand. The vial. The champagne glass. The plant where she'd poured it out. And I realized something. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about every night. Every comment. Every dismissal. Every time she'd made me feel small and wrong and fundamentally undeserving of love. This was about 22 years of being diminished. And I was done. I got in my car and drove home to my apartment, my mind working through possibilities. I didn't have a full plan yet. But I had something better. I had patience. I had observation. And I had proof. My mother thought she knew me. Thought I'd stay quiet and compliant like I always had. But she'd made a mistake tonight. She'd shown me exactly who she was. And I was going to show her exactly who I could be. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed with my laptop open, the photos pulled up on the screen, staring at them until my eyes burned. Maya had gone to bed hours ago, and the apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. Someone like me. The words kept circling in my head. What did that mean? Someone unambitious. Someone incapable. Someone who should know her place. I'd spent 4 years proving I was more than whatever she thought I was. I'd graduated at the top of my class. I'd published research as an undergraduate. I'd earned scholarships and awards and 3 job offers from labs that didn't hand out positions to people who weren't exceptional. But none of it mattered to her. I needed to understand why. Not for closure, I was past hoping for that. But because understanding her meant knowing how to move forward. And I couldn't move forward until I knew what I was dealing with. I opened a new document and started writing down everything I remembered. Every incident, every comment, every time she'd undermined me or dismissed me or made me feel invisible. I organized them chronologically, looking for patterns. The list grew long. When I was 8, she'd thrown away my science fair project the day before the competition, saying it was cluttering the garage. When I was 12, she'd told my piano teacher I wasn't serious about music and stopped my lessons without asking me. When I was 16 and got accepted to a summer program at MIT, she'd said it would be too hard, too far from home, that I wouldn't fit in with those kinds of students. I'd gone anyway. Paid for it with money I'd saved from tutoring. It was the first time I'd directly defied her, and she didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after I got back. But Daniel got a car for his 16th birthday. Got to go on a trip to Europe with his friends. Got praised for mediocre grades and average accomplishments. The pattern was clear. It had always been clear. I'd just spent so many years trying to earn my way out of it that I hadn't let myself see how deliberate it was. She didn't want me to succeed. And when I succeeded anyway, she punished me for it. The drugged champagne was just the most extreme version of something she'd been doing my entire life. Around 3 in the morning, I started researching. I looked up what substances could be slipped into a drink. Sedatives, mostly. Benzodiazepines. Things that would make someone drowsy, confused, unable to function properly. I imagined what would have happened if I'd drunk it. I'd have gotten tired during the dinner. Started slurring my words, maybe. My mother would have looked concerned, suggested I wasn't feeling well, that the stress of graduation had been too much. She'd have taken me home, put me to bed, and everyone would have whispered about how I'd fallen apart on what should have been my proudest day. It would have confirmed everything she'd ever implied about me. That I was fragile. Unstable. Not quite right. And no one would have questioned her version of events. The calculation in it made me feel sick. But it also made me angry. The kind of anger that burned clean and steady, not hot and explosive. The kind that clarified instead of clouded. I saved the document and closed my laptop. Then I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about what my mother didn't know. That I'd seen her. That I had evidence. That I was trained to observe and analyze and draw conclusions from data. She thought she knew me. But she only knew the daughter who'd spent years trying to please her. She didn't know the woman I'd become in spite of her. The one who'd learned to be meticulous, patient, strategic. I fell asleep just before dawn, and when I woke up 3 hours later, I knew what I was going to do. Not immediately. Not recklessly. But eventually. The next few days passed in a strange fog. I went through the motions, packed up my dorm room, said goodbye to professors, celebrated with friends. Maya threw me a small party at our apartment, and I laughed and drank cheap wine and pretended everything was normal. But underneath, I was thinking, planning, watching. My mother called twice. The first time to ask if I'd made a decision about the job offers yet. The second time to invite me to Sunday brunch, the one she'd mentioned to Daniel. I told her I was still considering my options. I accepted the brunch invitation. Her voice on the phone was pleasant. Interested. Like the dinner had never happened. Like she hadn't tried to drug me 3 days earlier. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Sunday came. I dressed carefully, nothing too formal, nothing too casual. I wanted to look put together but not like I was trying too hard. I'd learned over the years that my appearance was something she judged constantly, another way to find me lacking. I drove to their house, the one I'd grown up in, a sprawling colonial in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone and appearances were everything. Daniel's car was already in the driveway. I sat in my car for a moment before going in, steadying myself. This wasn't a confrontation. Not yet. This was reconnaissance. I needed to see how she'd act, what she'd say, whether she'd give anything away. I needed to understand her strategy before I deployed my own. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and something baking. My mother was in the kitchen, wearing an apron, her hair perfectly styled. She smiled when she saw me and said something about how wonderful it was to have everyone together. Daniel was at the table, scrolling through his phone. My father was reading the newspaper. It looked like a normal family brunch. I sat down and accepted the coffee my mother poured for me. I watched her hands, the same hands that had held that vial, as she set the cup in front of me. She asked how I was settling in after graduation. If I'd heard back from any of the labs yet. I told her I'd accepted the position at the Research Institute in Boston. It was the most prestigious of the 3 offers, the one that would give me the most opportunities. The one she'd called too ambitious. Her smile didn't falter, but I saw her grip tighten on the coffee pot. She said that was wonderful. That she hoped I knew what I was doing. That Boston was so far away. My father looked up from his paper and said he was proud of me. It was the first time he'd said anything directly supportive in months, and I saw my mother's jaw clench. Daniel congratulated me without looking up from his phone. The brunch continued. We ate quiche and fruit salad. My mother talked about the garden, about a charity event she was planning, about nothing that mattered. I responded appropriately, kept my voice neutral, gave nothing away. But I was watching. Always watching. At one point, she brought up a cousin who'd recently gone through a difficult divorce. She talked about how sad it was, how the cousin had always been so troubled, so unable to maintain stable relationships. The subtext was clear. This was what happened to women who didn't follow the right path, who reached too high, who didn't know their place. I said something sympathetic and non-committal. After brunch, my mother asked if I'd help her in the garden. Just the 2 of us. I said yes. Outside, the late May air was warm and humid. Her garden was immaculate, roses and peonies and carefully trimmed hedges. She handed me a pair of pruning shears and directed me to the rose bushes that needed deadheading. We worked in silence for a few minutes. Then she spoke. She said she was worried about me. That I seemed different lately. Distant. I kept my eyes on the roses and said I was just focused on the transition. New job. New city. A lot to think about. She made a small noise that might have been agreement. Then she said something that confirmed everything I'd suspected. She said that sometimes people got ahead of themselves. That they took on more than they could handle. That there was no shame in stepping back, in choosing something smaller and more manageable. She said this while cutting dead blooms from the rosebush, her movements precise and controlled. I understood. She was still trying to talk me out of the job. Still trying to keep me contained. I turned to face her, shears still in my hand. I told her I appreciated her concern. That I understood she wanted what was best for me. But that I'd made my decision, and I was confident in my ability to handle it. My voice was steady, calm, final. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise. Maybe even fear. Because I wasn't backing down. Wasn't apologizing. Wasn't asking for her approval. I was simply informing her. The moment stretched between us, taut and dangerous. Then she smiled, that same pleasant smile she always wore, and said of course. That she was sure I'd do wonderfully. But I knew better. I knew that smile. I'd seen it before every criticism, every undermining comment, every subtle sabotage. She wasn't done with me. And I wasn't done with her. I finished deadheading the roses, said goodbye to my father and Daniel, and drove back to my apartment with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind already 3 steps ahead. The photos were still on my phone. The evidence was still there. And now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. My mother didn't just want me to fail. She needed me to. My success threatened something in her, something fundamental to how she saw herself and her world. Which meant she'd keep trying. And when she did, I'd be ready.